Hello, welcome back once again to Out on That Line podcast. My name is Jeff, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
You know, just sitting over here, minding my own business, waiting to get deep in the weeds with podcasting. I'm focused, I'm thriving, and I'm here to share an experience with the listeners today. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. And we are going to be talking about a band this week that maybe we should have talked about already on this podcast because they kind of fit right into a genre that we've covered extensively. Of course, we're talking about the Red Clay Strays and their new album, Grateful. Now, Red Clay Strays, like I have known about them for a long time. I have spent zero amount of time listening to them. So I don't know, is your experience about the same, Alex?
Pretty much the name comes across the feed every now and then, and you bump on a song, and you're like, yeah, hell yeah. And that's about as far as it ever has gone.
I can't even say that I've bumped on a song. Like I don't know that I could have told you that I've listened to a Red Clay Strays song previous to listening to this album. So this, even though I was familiar with the band, this was a fresh experience for me. So they released this album beginning of June, so it came out just a bit ago. I did not look up like any reception or reviews of this one, but I gotta say, knowing who they tend to be associated with when they get like mentioned and when I see them in my feeds and things like that, it did not sound the way that I thought it was going to sound.
What were you expecting it to sound like?
I think I was expecting, a name like Red Clay Strays. I was expecting more of like, I guess like a Turnpike Troubadours sort of thing, or like a very much that like red dirt sort of country. And I think what I found I got is something I would compare more to like Government Mule or Rolling Stones, definitely a little bit more of like or Blackberry Smoke. Vocally, I kept getting like reminders of Chris Stapleton in kind of the tone and the shape of the words that the lead singer would use. So nothing that I was like disappointed by, I would say, but definitely a surprise as I was kind of moving through the album.
Yeah, it's some of that sweet, sweet Southern rock. I was not expecting it to hit the heights of Southern rock that it did. Like, I didn't expect necessarily the Blackberry Smoke analog because some of the stuff I heard, and I can't pull any song out of my ass and be like, well, this one. I just know that I've listened and been like, oh, that was good. And then looking, I'm like, oh, Red Clay Strays. So when we talked about it, I was like, yeah, okay, great opportunity to get
Mhm.
further in there. But, you've only touched the tip of the iceberg and you get this album, which has like a decent amount of like Southern rock eclecticism to it and some blues and stuff like that. And there's like pretty reasonable, nice variation to it, but a very, very strong swamp rock, Southern rock
Mhm.
spine going up the middle of it. Um, Brandon Coleman, the singer, yes, vocally a lot of similarities with Chris Stapleton. You hear a couple of the like Tyler Childers fucking scream from the pits of hell, kind of like you hear some of the same like emotional techniques coming out as Childers. Um, it's a very 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 powerful instrument that suits this really well. Yeah, I got the Government Mule comparison for sure. There's some Skinner, there's some Allman Brothers. I mean, there's a lot in the ooze here in the cosmic gumbo. Without like getting too confused and getting too far out ahead of its skis and trying to do too much. It was very natural. It feels like very natural storytelling and songcraft. One thing off the top is you can tell these guys fuck live.
Yeah.
They rock the fuck out live. You can tell that. You don't quite get the same effect
Mhm.
here. A studio version, clearly, in a year where we've been listening to a lot of music that was recorded live, that gives you like the flavor of the live show, that is missing here. You can tell this is built to be a live experience, and the studio versions of it are often just a hair too constrained for me.
I think and I'm certainly not like a mixing expert or anything like that. I just kind of I know what I know, and it definitely sounded like very compressed. And I did get the same sense you did, where I was like, man, this stuff has got to like absolutely fuck live. And so I went and listened. They have a couple live albums that have come out, and so I went and listened to those, and obviously those were recorded live because they were live performances, and it is a, I don't want to say night and day because it's not like it's like a different band or anything like that. You certainly, it's still recognizable as the same band, but it's like it's a much different feel. And I think where, again, if it's like, you know, I don't want to like jump into criticizing it right off the bat because overall I think I did enjoy it pretty well. Um, you know, I think where I got kind of lost in, especially after going and listening to those live performances, I feel like there was just a level that we could have gotten to. And I think the songs on this album have that, like, have that power and just weren't allowed to realize their full capability.
Yeah, I some of that, like that concept of like realizing something to your full capability trickles down lyrically at certain points too, which we can touch on.
Mhm.
Which like the we just recorded an episode about Jalen and Ganda. I don't know which of these is going to come out first, but
It's a
it was kind of
mystery.
what's that?
It's a mystery.
It's a true mystery egg, gang. What's inside? Um, it some songs that were pretty on the nose. There were some songs that felt a little ham-fisted lyrically, but the point is, musically, the talent's all there. Yes, it feels like, there's another gear that can be reached, and there's a feeling. Maybe not even necessarily another gear in terms of like, you know, intensity or volume or something like that, but just the magic of all being in the room together playing. Like I will listen to recordings of stuff that I've made with our friends, and I'm like, you can tell when we were all in the same room
Mhm.
vibing. It's just there's a magic, and it's not going to work for everybody. And studio versions, there are studio versions that kick the shit out of their live versions, and there are some people who just don't translate. Like I imagine, I never saw Steely Dan in their heyday. I can't imagine they put on as good a show as they do an album.
Yeah.
I prefer like when they went into the studio and we're like, we're not really touring. It's like, all right, now you've officially hit my speed. So like, if you're not a studio perfectionist whose music kind of demands to be heard that way, and you're into all facets of the production and the mixing and the mastering and the like audio fidelity, and you're like a live rockin' band, yeah, you lose a little bit in the sauce when you make a studio version of it. But at the same time, like that's I guess the front end load with some criticism. And again, we'll get to some of the songs where I'm like, little heavy handed. But in terms of like what worked about this, it's way more what worked than what didn't. Again,
Yeah.
Brandon Coleman's vocals are totally off the chain, really elevates and like puts a huge like soulful power behind a lot of these songs. There's really fun genre fusion that works. The southern rock, the gospel, the soul, the blues, it all fits pretty seamlessly without sounding forced. Like we're gonna make this work. It feels very organic. Fantastic production. Dave Cobb is the producer on this.
Of course. Yeah.
So like even though it's not a live album, there's like pretty obvious chemistry
Yeah.
that's captured in this. Um, even though not every single song I think rings super authentic, there's an emotional honesty that runs through this whole thing that buys you a hell of a lot of goodwill.
Yeah, and for me, you know, there's definitely some like real standout songs. Like there's, and I think that's where wanting to hear this recorded live would have made such a huge difference, because this band is obviously like, as good as like we've blown his horn about the vocals already. This band is great too, and a lot of it did sound very inventive, you know, in a genre where it can sound very contrived. You know, I think the reason that like Blackberry Smoke has not like absolutely blown up into one of the biggest rock and roll bands in the world is because what they're doing is not all that different from like Leonard Skinner. You know, it's a very, very strong representation of that like southern rock, you know, rock and roll kind of country formula. But while I love that in the albums, fuck, I think the thing that holds them back is that it can sound very derivative sometimes. That if you love that genre, you're going to absolutely love Blackberry Smoke, but they're not going to be the ones that get you into it. Skinnerd is the one that's going to get you into that genre because there hadn't been anything that sounded like them before. I think where the Red Clay Strays shine is while they're associated with a lot of members of that genre, they don't really sound anything like. There's some things that you can compare to a Tyler Childers or you can compare to, a Turnpike Troubadours. They don't really sound anything like them. They definitely sound like the Red Clay Strays. That has a lot to do with his voice, but it also has a lot to do with the band. I think that guitar tone that they have, I love that just overdriven tube amp guitar sound. I think that is one of the purest things in music. And they crush that over and over and over again on this album. And where your criticism of a band like Government Mule can be, Warren Haynes is fantastic. A lot of those solos sound the same. They hit the same notes, right? There's a reason that Allman Brothers were so great, and one member of the Allman Brothers isn't quite as good. And I think when you listen to a band like Red Clay Strays, it's funny, all of the parts you would think would result in something more spectacular. What it results in is just something that is like a great representation of the genre of country music, of blues, of rock and roll, without necessarily being something you'd consider as special as like a Tyler Childers or Sturgill Simpson when he was doing like his version. I think part of it is the lyrical content. I think there is not as much honesty as there could be, and maybe there's just isn't as much heartbreak in the first place as those other people experience. Maybe they've all lived like they've kind of towed the line their whole lives, so they don't have those things that they can write about. I think there's songs like Fool's Gold and Down South that are extremely good. I think my best example of probably the best songwriting on here that I found that I like dug into the most is the song If I Didn't Know You. That felt like the most inventive thing lyrically on here because it felt the most honest. It felt like there was the most pain in there, or not pain, but just like the most like thought-provoking lyrics. And I think it was a lens looked through that they didn't look through on the rest of the album. So like there are certainly some really high highs on this album, but I think where you point out that like the lyrical content can feel very derivative, I think in a lot of cases it is.
There are some times, like when I think of a song like Demons in Your Choir is a great song with a
Yes,
great
that's
message and
another
a
great.
great way to start the album and really kick it off. Like again, the art of the album placement, Demons in Your Choir, a ripper to start things off to get you invested. Where I first was kind of like, eh, again, it feels a little forced, and I think part of it might have to do with the timing. But the song "People Hating,"
Yes, because they were trying to say something and they didn't really say anything.
yeah, this came out around the time Charlie Kirk died, and it feels like the song is wanting to have some kind of place in that dialogue, but it's being weirdly wishy-washy
Mhm.
and it's a little too prescriptive and preachy to like really knock anybody off their pedestal. Uh, it's yeah, I don't know.
Like
I
when
think it
Eric
was
Church gets like a little political in his music, it's like he only gets a little political.
and that's the thing is I don't mind if you get political. Listen, I don't mind if you get political in the complete opposite direction of my politics to the point where you like piss me off and I'm like, "How could you think such a thing?"
Yeah.
Like if it's done in a full-throated creative way, I will hear you out and then I reserve the right to be pissed off and hate you and never listen to you again. But like valid creative expression, if you have something to say and you have the balls to say it, and this song kind of felt like a little bit of a half measure, and just again, if you're going to go political, just say what you mean. Say
Mhm.
what you mean. You will offend someone. You don't have to like step around it. Just put it out there and see what happens. At the same time, this song comes out when it came out, and we're on the as they say in The Sopranos, Little Carmine, the precipice of a major, or the crossroads or the precipice of an enormous crossroads. And that's kind of what happened with the band. Is like it took them 10 years to really get much going, and it was with their last album that they finally like crossed over mainstream. And maybe they're not necessarily a household name, but their profile rose. And a lot of this album is talking about that. It's reflecting on the struggle rather than being like, fame hasn't changed us yet, Rick Springfield, and like they're going to explore some lavish new lifestyle. It's a lot of reflection on like the road to get here. And so then you get a song like People Hating, and it kind of smacks of like, now that you're here, you don't want to like drive anyone away or piss anyone off. And maybe it's not fair to say that that's what they were going through, but it's what the song has a tendency to smack of at certain points. Not a bad song necessarily, but a heavy-handed one that, with some tweaking, I think could have been really good.
Yeah. And I think, like not everybody has to go extreme one way or the other politically. Obviously I have my views, and you have your views. I think you and I definitely align on a whole lot of things. But if you're going to go political, like there's nothing worse that you could do than be so wishy-washy about it, and do these half measures. I think about like Springsteen with Streets of Minneapolis. Like there's not not saying anything about whether the song is any good, because I think I've been on record saying I don't think that song is very good, but he did not pull any punches whatsoever about how he felt about how things were going on. And I think that can, well, obviously Bruce Springsteen is not got to worry about being able to sell out stadiums. I think he could have pooped on stage and people are still buying tickets for it. I think it's obviously a different level of fame, a different ball game as far as like what he could get away with saying. But it's also like, if you're also not the most popular and your profile isn't as high as it could be, like why wouldn't you get a little riskier with what you're saying? I think the opposite like the argument can be made of like, oh, stay down the middle so you don't lose half your audience or whatever. But it's like, maybe you gain more of an audience by not staying in the middle one way or the other. You know what I mean? I think there are definite, like, I think I think you get what you want to get out of this album. I don't think there's really heavy criticisms you can make on any of it. I think if anything, it's lyrical content, which really isn't that bad. It's just not very revelatory. There's nothing new I'm hearing in any of this. It's just, again, hearing like very solid musicians play very solid songs in which they get pretty inventive at certain times, hearing a great singer singing lyrics that really don't offend anybody. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that are going to find, meaning in those lyrics, but anybody that like might create a real emotional attachment to them, I'm like, what kind of other BS are you listening to that this is what you created that emotional attachment to? I would be much more interested to have heard this album recorded live, like we were talking about, and hearing, maybe a little bit something more raw, a little bit more of those, like, it not sounding as perfect, because every part of it sounds perfect. And that's part of the issue, is like, I don't expect this kind of music to sound perfect. It's not computer generated. There should be some room for some mistakes, maybe like a dead note here and there that would make me feel like this is a little bit more lived in, and they're not like trying to kind of play a character of what like Southern rock should sound like.
Yeah, and I mean, you get something like Drew Nix and Zach Rochelle. It might be Richel, but I'm going to say Rochelle and be a little Rochelle. Drew Nix and Zach Rochelle play a mean guitar. Are they like the next generation of guitar virtuoso? Probably not. But they're really, really talented. It's like when you have this level of talent and passion available to you, just go for it. And I think in most cases they did. Again, there are some punch pulley moments or some heavy handed moments where it's like, what? But you get to the 1-2 punch like Fool's Gold into Can't Fix You. Fool's Gold musically is so much fun. It's got that kind
Mhm.
of like Muscle Shoals. This is an Alabama band too. Like
Yeah.
that's the whole Red Clay Stray thing. Um, but it's really got the like that great rhythm and blues fusion with the Southern rock. A nice little delightful treat that goes right into Can't Fix You, which has a great message that is delivered well. It's done in a very like nuanced way. And that to me is the stuff that stands out is like you're being very genuine. You're not rising to meet a moment that you don't have to. Like, I think of the Dave Chappelle bit, it's like 9/11's happening and they're trying to call Ja Rule. Where is Ja? Does anyone know what Ja thinks of this? Where is Ja? It's like, I don't necessarily look for my country music artists to tell me how to feel about January 6th or Charlie Kirk or anything like that. Like, yeah, it's fine if you want to talk about it, but you have to have like an interesting point of view to it and don't like mince words. And again, I hate to like harp on this one instance where I feel like they did that when there's so much good stuff going on.
Mhm.
But I guess it's just a like for a band that's been around for 10 years and is finally starting to see its peak, just lean hard into that shit that you do so well. Like the last song, Grateful, is so joyful and it has such an amazing perspective and
Mhm.
it's big and it's emotional and it's a fantastic capper on the album and it's a great song to name the whole album. Grateful, you're grateful for everything you've been through and everything you've achieved. Like it's really fantastic. Steer hard into that kind of stuff. Anything that you make that you love is going to come out so much better than shit that
Mhm.
you feel obligated to talk about, or even worse, things you hate. Like that's the best writing advice I ever got indirectly was if you write about shit you hate to try to make a point, we're all gonna see what you're doing and it's gonna suck. If you write about something you love and share your joy, we're all gonna see what you're doing and it's gonna rise.
Mhm.
So to me, that's like they do so much stuff so right. If I didn't like a song like People Hating or Do Today, it's a small quibble on an album that's otherwise doing a lot of heavy lifting with genre fusion and great musicianship. Like when I say that Nix and Rochelle are, it's like, well, they're not like the best guitar players you ever heard. You know, we had
They're
to
not
talk
much
about Warren Haynes, and
they're not much worse than the best guitar players you've ever heard either.
they ain't much farther behind. And even the great Warren Haynes, like you said, a lot of those solos get the samey disease. They get a bad case of the samies, and like doesn't really happen here. So relative strengths and weaknesses. So it's a great lesson in use what you got that's unique to you, make it shine. And I think their 10-year journey proves that to get to where they are. Like they like stay true to yourselves. Now that you're here, don't stray. No pun intended. Ah,
Yep.
all right, all right, all right.
Yeah, so to me, Grateful is a song that I would normally just not even give a second listen to because I'm not a religious man. I don't believe it, but I think this is probably what feels like the most authentic song on the album because this is where I truly feel like he was writing from his heart. I think it's also the biggest display of his vocal talent on this whole the way he hits grateful in that chorus is like big time, big time. Like this guy could sing that in church, he could sing in a gospel choir and probably be the lead in that. And I think, I lyrically, obviously there's nothing new. It sounds like any other like Christian rock song that you've ever heard is like, oh, I was broken, but he saved me kind of thing. But I think the power with which he delivers that, along with this was also like the most government mule sounding song on here. Like all I could hear about was Soul Shine, on this song. And I love Soul Shine. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. And normally, again, like this lyrical content would not do anything for me, but when it's delivered in the way that it is, it's like the album succeeds in spite of any of the criticisms that we're giving it. And
That's
Grateful
a
is like a perfect example of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Your mileage may vary with like outwardly religious content, but I think even approaching it from outside of that lens, if you're agnostic, atheist, or just haven't thought about it or whatever, you can still get a lot out of it from outside. Like, you don't have to subscribe to that religion to get something from it, which I think makes it a strong song. Like, it doesn't box you out by being like, imagine if you were gay and listening to a song that was about like how Jesus says it's so wrong to be gay. You'd be like, all right, well, clearly this is not for me. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
That's not really like what's happening here. It's a pure, more relatable expression done through a very like faith-based lens at times. But again, this isn't an album that like concerns itself in hatred and division. It sometimes might have like a facile answer to how do we deal with these kinds of things. Um, but again, that's only ever occasionally, and the joy with which it was made, the talent with which it was made, and the choice selects on this that really, really stand out. I think for me, this has got to be like an 8 out of 10.
I'm right there with you. 8 out of 10 was what I was feeling like from first listen. That's kind of the what I and I subsequent listens. I was like, did that change? And it didn't. I think I still liked the things that I liked. I still had the same criticisms, on the second and third listens. And again, like if you haven't listened to the Red Clay Strays, but you do like the other bands that we've talked about, the other artists we've talked about, absolutely give this album a spin. But I would suggest to you more, give their live albums a spin, because that I think is where they harness the full power of what I think the Red Clay Strays are. And next time I have a chance to see them live, absolutely going to make that happen. So I know we've talked all those artists we were talking about, Alex. I'm pretty sure we've done episodes on just about every single one of them. So where can folks find all of that content, all that sweet, sweet content?
Oh, it's so sweet. It's like when you see a video of someone eating a honeycomb, right? Like, it feels so naughty. It feels like you should have a towel over your head, like you're eating ortolan to hide your shame from God. You messy bastard. You're just taking this big piece of like a bee's. A bee worked so hard to make this. Multiple bees worked so hard to make this beautiful. You know why honey is so easy to digest? Because it's already been digested by the bee. What a gift. And you've got this just aesthetically beautiful, ooey gooey, delicious treat, and you just mash it into your little dough hole. And it's just, oh my God, all your senses light up. Your brain is like a pinball machine of opinions. You've never been happier. You've never been calmer. And this euphoria washes over you. It washes over you, even. And you can experience that same sensation without getting your hands dirty at youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, we are nothing if not a couple of honey bees who are over here. You've only had a taste of honey with this episode. We promise you, we got a whole beehive waiting for you. We've worked very hard. We're industrious and we ain't shy and we ain't that hard to find. So why don't you come on down and subscribe? Join the channel. Make sure you click the bell so that your notifications are on and you never miss out on content that we're putting out. You hit the thumbs up button to like the video. So important from an ego standpoint, so important from an algorithmic standpoint. Even more important than that is leaving comments. Yes, you can hype the video. Yes, you can and should share it with a friend. Absolutely. These things go without saying. But the comments are really kind of like the make or break component of these, okay? We used to not hear from people, and now we hear from people all the time. And sometimes it's people who just need the voices in their heads to be heard. And I can relate to those people, okay? I am one of you. I just happen to have bought the equipment and had a friend that wanted to do this. So, this could have been you. This could be you someday. Am I a cautionary tale? Is that what this podcast is? Hey, you know what? That's a public service. And that means that our lives amounted to something, which is a lot more than we can say for fucking a lot of these bozos out there today, especially the ones in Washington. Am I right, folks? We're not afraid to get political. Are we going to say specifically who? No, because we don't know how you voted. And we don't want to piss you off and alienate you. We just want your sweet, sweet views and the sweet, sweet money that they generate. Okay. If we hated the right stuff and we really kind of like honked on the right stuff and we're like total sellouts, this channel, we could be making so much money. We could quit our day jobs and move to Guam. I don't know if that's a good move for either of us, but we could do it. We would have the means to take the operation to Guam if we wanted. But instead, we're real artists and we stay true to ourselves. Okay. I think it results in authentic content that you can share with Meemaw and that you can feel good about telling your church folk about. At youtube.com/C/out on that line. Folks, we went from a fucking bee metaphor to this, okay? That's just what happens on the show. Stay with me, be light on your feet, and keep an open mind. youtube.com/C/out on that line.
Yeah, you better keep an open something, folks. Until next time.